Peter Dempsey. Peter is the representative of ARC Holdings, which is a group of companies that looks after the compliance of electrical installations. So they specialize in compliance, they specialize in electrical installations, and they also specialize in training. So Peter, very warm welcome to you as well. And yeah, like Peter says, he's definitely a jack of all trades. He holds the positions of coffee maker, tea maker, bookkeeper, and CEO in the company. So, but definitely a expert in his field with 33 years of experience. And yeah, so Peter, from my side, very warm welcome to you, and thank you for being the host for our workshop today. And yeah, we're excited to hear what you've got in store for us, and what we can learn from you. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Annelies and Gerard and everybody else. Yeah, baie dankie. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah, I am the cook and the pot washer and the accountant and whatever you want to call it. But most of all, I think I have a passion for compliance and things that are right, and sharing knowledge, and especially in an industry which we find that there's a lot of people, artisans specifically, that wants to do good work, and they probably do good work. The challenge lies with their paperwork and the legal aspects of things. The only documentation that contractors are good with is invoices. You know, don't give them a specification, they suffer and they fail and they don't understand. Don't give them long you know, technical reports. They're probably not going to read all of that. Give them a couple of photographs and tell them and show them on the photograph what has to happen, and then you'll probably find that there's a lot more resolve from that side. So training has always been very a big passion for me. After 33 years, I think you've seen a lot. I think we've experienced a lot. And what makes us slightly different to other contractors, if you want to, in the industry, is that we not only talk, but we can also walk the walk. I have probably issued hundreds, if not, well, close to 1,000 of these certificates before. We have done hundreds of these reports. We've done hundreds of these consultations. We've done hundreds of construction jobs itself. So if a guy tells me that it's very difficult or it's impossible, then it's something that I can relate to, because, you know, we see both sides of the industry. So the doing part and the talking part for us comes together. And the topic that we chose today is related to electrical compliance. I think very important, especially in the agricultural industry, because it's not always a key focus. Key focus is get the farming done, get the product in the supplier chain, and collect the money. The rest will follow suit. En dis gewoonlik daai rest that follows suit that gets neglected, and then it can bite you. And we don't want to end up in that situation. So ek gaan so 'n bietjie met almal deel. I'm going to share a little bit with everybody what we've seen and what it does mean to deal with electrical compliance from both angles, which is the one for normal atmospheres, which we find in areas where there is no explosion risk. And then we're also going to look at the one that deals with explosion risk compliance status, majority of focus going to be on dust atmospheres and a smaller focus on gas, vapors, and liquids. And the reason simply being, everybody fills up their cars with petrol. So we are more or less good idea that these flammable stuff can burn and explode. But the dust one is not always that familiar, and the risks involved with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. We're excited to hear what you've got in store for us.
Good. I'm going to, let's quickly see. Yeah, here we go.
Peter, you're gonna share your screen with us. So you muted there.
Ja, ek gaan nou.
Ons gaan nou, ons is nou daar.
There we go.
Clear screen.
All right.
Peter, I don't know whether you're comfortable with the following. I think you just need to lead us. Do you want me to just have a look for any hands that raises for questions during the session, or do you want to wait till the end for questions?
Gerard, I think yeah, we can let's play by ear. I think if we can have maybe some questions at the end of the section, I could perhaps interrupt the presentation and say, guys, let's give a couple of minutes for question before we go on to the next slide.
I think so. That might be better, right, because we're going to deal with a lot of subject matter. I think let's give after every section, let's maybe give some time for the guys just to get their wits about that specific topic.
And then just for everybody's sake, you'll probably hear based on my accent, ek is maar 'n boerseun, so I'm going to try and put the English out as best as I possibly can. So yeah, if it does come out a bit skew and a bit crom, don't worry too much about it. I think they'll get the understanding. All right, so on the screen we have Flameproof Solutions, which is one of the affiliates in our organization. We specifically deal with compliance in explosive atmospheres, whether it is gases, vapors, or liquids, or combustible dust. And also, which people won't always be aware of, medical facilities. Although they don't fall under the category of explosive atmospheres, they fall under what we call specialized electrical installations. A very quick example there is that the earth leakage device, which we're all familiar with in our homes, you know, that protects owners and consumers against faulty equipment, you won't find in certain parts in a hospital. So you have to compensate for that risk by using another type of electrical installation. And hence it's called a specialized electrical installation in a medical facility. I mean, if you go for an operation and the earth leakage trips, that is really not going to have a good outcome for you. So as part of the definition on legislation, medical facilities are included in the scope of what we would call specialized electrical installations. But we're not going to deal with that because I think everybody is fairly healthy. So we're going to move on to the next one. If we quickly have a look at the program, Gerard, You know, I had a bowl of jungle oats this morning, so I'm fired up. So you'll have to just make sure that somewhere along the line you call it time. If you see I extended it a little bit, but I'm happy if we interrupt, as I said, with some questions, that's fine. I think if we quickly have a look at the program, it talks about what does the Act say. I've seen that on some of the people that have logged in, we've got some really good experts in the legal fraternity. So it's going to be interesting to see, you know, if they agree with me or not. But from a layman perspective, this is what we see happens in the legal environment if our industry discipline, compliance, is involved in legal cases. So I'm going to share a little bit about that with you. Peter, does that mean you've been in court many a time? Fortunately, on the good side of the court, not on the bad side of the court. You know, we've acted on a number of cases as expert witnesses for entities. So yeah, we have a little bit of experience and see how the court actually deals with it. And then we're going to have a little bit of a break, and then I'm going to go into a little bit more specifics in terms of, so I want comply. I want to make sure that, you know, my installation meets the requirements. I want to be on the right side of the law. How do I approach it? How do I do it? In daar gaan ons 'n bietjie, we're going to share a little bit more about the practical things and how to do this. The outcome for today, I think, is awareness. I think if everybody walks away from this and say, whoa, okay, this brings a whole new folder or file on my shelf there in my health and safety offices or in my manager's offices that deals with the risk of compliance and particular perhaps explosion risks and how to deal with it. That file can either be a very thick file or can it be a very thin file, a small file. The only thing that the file should not be is a scary file. It's not scary. It's something that it might be unfamiliar, but it's something that happens, and a lot of people do it. Not everybody does it the correct way, but they make an effort, and that's probably where we can come in and we can assist and say, guys, you're on the right track, but you're using the wrong steps to get there. And then we will then formally open to a question and answer session, and of course, then we'll have our feedback, and I see that on the program it makes provision for Annelies to close up. Again, I just like to point out that I'm going to answer the questions as best as I possibly can. I'm really open to any email correspondence. So if you want to send me some emails with your specific questions, I'm happy to do that. And yeah, as far as the rest is concerned, let's take it. I think that everybody is aware of the fact that workplaces are governed by the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and it makes it clear that employers are responsible to ensure a safe working environment. And no question that electricity is probably used on all of these sites. I don't think there's any place that does not use electricity, and whether it's self-generated or whether we get it from a supply authority, Eskom, whoever it might be, there is electricity. And whenever you deal with electricity, the installation and the work must be done in a manner so that it's safe for people, animals, equipment, and buildings. And that is very specifically described in the Act. Just a bit of a clarity here. Remember, if anything goes wrong in an installation, then most people think that, you know what, well, what does the rule book say? What does the code of practice say? The courts at that stage are not interested in the code of practice. They look at the legislation, and if there is a clause in the Act or a regulation or whatever in the Act that you have not complied with, then they will charge you under that clause. It's only when we hear the case and the evidence is presented that we will then refer to authorized codes or practices or standards, and we'll take the technical detail out of there. So I get a lot of electricians saying, Peter, but they can't do anything to me because the code says the following. It says, put your code away. It's not about the code right now. It's about the act first. And my experience has been that there's a lot of people that are not that familiar with the elements in the act that deal specifically with electrical installations. And there's two prominent regulations, and the one is the electrical machinery regulations, and of course the other one, the electrical installation regulations. I had a chat with a group of guys the other day, and I asked him, you know, how big is the Occupational Health and Safety Act? And the guys are saying, oh, you know, it's a thick book and it takes you ages. And I said, boys, there's 6 pages in the act. The rest are technical stuff, and it has no relevance to, all of them has relevance to your specific industry. So be aware of what is written in the 6 pages of the act, and then you can specify in your particular industry what you need to know. So for the act, what type of installations are excluded? You know, that the misconception that, Peter, I generate my own electricity. I don't need Eskom. I don't need anybody. I've got the sun, and that's it. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. A workplace remains a workplace. Electricity is a dangerous entity, and it offers risks if it's not used properly. So whether you generate your own electricity through solar or for whatever indebted method, or hydro, I don't know, you can call it, you have to comply with the act. Excluded are, of course, installations that are less than 50 volts. These are things that we can get from a battery or from inverters, but then, you know, you don't get electric motors or pumps or stuff like that that operates at less than 50 volts. So that section deals more with instrumentation. So if we've got gauges and pressure sensors and flow meters and motion sensors, they work with 12 to 24, maybe 48 volts. And those circuits would be excluded from the electrical installation. For the rest, boys, we're in, and we can't say that, you know, we're not part of it. The last line talks about telecommunication. Yeah, of course, in the olden days, we had a lot of telephone systems and lines running, and now it's all fiber and underground, so not part of the scope for the code. So it doesn't matter where you get your electricity from. If you're a user, you distribute, you consume, you then have to comply with the requirements in the Act. Everybody, and I think from school-going age, we are taught that electricity is dangerous, and therefore the way in which we engage with it, the way in which we use it, must be done in a manner that you know, doesn't endanger our lives. And the first step for that, of course, would be to have a safe installation. If you have a house and you invite people over to come and enjoy an afternoon with you, and one of the children, you know, gets injured by an electric shock, then of course the question would be, was the child negligent? It doesn't matter. The onus is on the user of that installation to ensure that he's taken all steps to make sure that the installation remains safe. So if you've got a farm or a factory or whatever, that falls straight on the category of a workplace. Therefore, the owner and of the installation is responsible for whatever action is taking place in as far as an electrical incident is concerned. So it must be constructed in a safe way. It has to comply with rules and regulations. We find that in mining, agricultural, domestic, industrial, commercial, petroleum, everybody has their own little twitch on how things get done in their industry. Mining works a little bit different. Voltage is slightly different. They use some other potential there. And of course, their approach to earth faults is different. The petroleum industry, of course, they've got the additional risk of explosive atmospheres. They do it a little bit different. For the rest of us, we are more or less in the same game. In the electrical field, we say plugs is plugs and lights is lights. It might be a little bit a bigger scale, but the fundamentals, if you want to, remains more or less the same. And for that, that's very clear. The owner user is responsible. Excluders, of course, the stuff on trains and ships and those kind of things. And someone asked me the other day, but Peter, why would a ship not be included? I mean, they also use a lot of electricity in the cabins and in the lounges. And I said, yeah, the problem is that if we have to run an earth wire and we attach it into Durban Harbour and the ship leaves for Singapore or whatever, that's going to be quite a wire that stretches over the ocean. So no. Their wiring technique and the installation is different, and the same with trains and aircraft as well. The owner user remains responsible to ensure the safe use and the maintaining thereof. And Peter, I own a farm and I'm going to rent it out, or I've got a factory or a premises and we're going to rent it out. What about the tenants? Can we keep them responsible? Well, the Act says you may, but that liability and responsibility must be transferred in writing. So your contract must say, boys, I've given you an installation and it complies. Here's the certificate to prove so. What we want from you is the same in return. And whatever happens in between, you are responsible for that. So that is possible to do that. But you cannot do that verbally. The Act's clear. It must be in writing. The custodians are the Department of, they now called what? Employment and Labor. So it's going to be a difficult abbreviation. In the old days it was DOL, now it's DOEL something. It just sounds a bit confusing with the Department of Education, but let's stick with the word DOL. I think everybody is familiar with that. And then of course our Chief Inspector Factories. We've got two of them, mines, the one for mines and the one for factories. The guys for the factories, yeah, they basically look at the upkeep of the legislation. And interesting enough, funny in our country, is they are also enforcing the Act. We find that in a lot of places like the UK, Australia, and America, you have different entities that are actually enforcing the legislation. In South Africa, we started to talk about that. We said that maybe we should set up something called an electrical safety board. All contractors and all consumers pay a levy, and the safety board will then have an inspectorate, and they will then go and investigate and see if there is a complaint, what is wrong and how to fix it, etc. In South Africa, our friends at DOL tries and manages from fire extinguishers right to, slippery surfaces, machine guarding, electrical compliance. I, in my personal opinion, don't think that these guys are 100%, lined up for all of these speciality fields. So is there something on the cards? There is something on the cards, but like any piece of legislation, it's going to take a while. The concept is called the Electrical Safety Board, and we are working, and if we say we, I'm involved in a couple of these platforms where we discuss these matters. Sometimes we get some progress, sometimes we don't. But the idea would be to set up a safety board and let them enforce the legislation and see. Earlier on, I spoke about two regulations, the EIR and the EMR. It stands for the Electrical Installation Regulations, and the electrical machinery regulations. Both of these are documentations or sections in the Act regulations, as we know, dealing specific with the industry, the electrical industry. One is a technical component, and the one is a compliance component. So the one tells you this is how you install stuff, this is what you do, this is how you repair and maintain it. And the other one tells you that this is the documentation, these are the kinds of inspections you need, this is the kinds of liability that exists. So the two deals with a little bit different accents when it comes to the electrical industry. In our training, we put a lot of focus on both of these regulations to make sure people understand the difference between the two, and that once they have a clear understanding, they know where to go and look for if they are looking at a particular topic to get clarity on. South African legislation says that owners and users of electrical installations, guys, whether you're running a factory, a home, or you know, a little holiday accommodation, or you know, you are rent in a shopping complex, if you use an electrical installation, you must have a valid certificate of compliance. I'd like to put the accent on the word valid here, because like any other industry, you know, you can call it, I don't know where and what, and I don't want to use names, but we are also sort of a bit faced with challenges as far as fly-by-nighters are concerned and scammers are concerned. I'll tell you a little bit more about that, and there is ways you can deal with that. But please make sure that the certificate that you've got is a valid certificate. The basic rules are, you know, who issues it. And then, of course, understand, read it carefully. There's not that much technical stuff on there. There is a lot of stuff that you can look at. The guy says here, all the switches must have covers. And if you find one or two covers missing, then I think you can question the validity thereof. There's some numbers that the guys have to fill in. Most of these guys will not fill in the numbers, or they would have bogus numbers. You know, if it's a 4-digit number and they've got 9 digits or something, you probably wouldn't know much, but try and see, interrogate. It's always good to interrogate the documentation. We've seen a trend happening now that in places like Swaziland and Lesotho and in Mozambique and in Namibia, there's a lot of interest in our way of certifying electrical installations, and in those countries that I've mentioned, our certification is acceptable. It's a dual system, so you'll have local, or you can use the British standard. Some of them uses the British standard as well. It's a very complex standard, the British one, and of course not everybody carries that accreditation to be able to issue the British certificate. So we have a lot of these things that or rather neighboring countries that accept our certificates of compliance. The certificate of compliance in Afrikaans, we refer to 'n sertifikaat van voldoening of 'n sertifikaat van nakoming. Maar I think the term everybody is familiar with is a CFC. So we're going to stick with the CFC. It can only be issued by a registered person. In the olden days, we used to call them accredited persons, and then the legislator says, no, you can accredit an institution or organization, you cannot accredit an individual. So we had to change the word to a registered person. And in the industry, we've got 3 categories, and I'm going to share with you the categories of the different persons that may issue these certificates. What does it mean to be registered? Peter, I'm an electrician, I'm registered with the department. No, you're not. When you're an artisan, it means that you have competency and you can prove the competency for a specific trade. And when we want you to be able to assess and express an opinion on the safety of an electrical installation, we would like you to be registered to be able to do so. And so not all electricians are registered persons. The chances are 99.9% that all registered persons are are electricians, although we do get some engineering professional qualified guys that may apply for accreditation or registration rather with the chief inspector to become a registered person that can issue these certificates. So there's two categories, either under 11 or 9, and they just simply refer to the old system and the new system. The first category was created for much more of the domestic market. You know, we've got a lot of low-cost housing going up very quickly. These are simple structures with simple installations, and the idea was that these guys must go out and look at these single-phase supply houses, 2 plugs, 2 lights, maybe a water heater, and quickly see if it's safe, and you know, if there's a change required, do that. They walk around with little blue certificates, a little card that's got a blue background. For people that are in the industry, my advice would be very careful of these guys, because the challenge they are facing is that when they go to a low-costing environment, the tenants or the owners or the residents of these areas don't even have money to pay for electricity. Where are they going to find the money to pay someone to fix up the installation or disconnect illegal supplies or connect illegal supply? It's not going to happen. So these Blue Guide Brigade, they go and look in the industry for work. They call themselves registered, and they've got this little card, and everybody reads the card. It comes from the Department of Labor. Yes, this is he is not allowed to work on 3-phase installations. So be very careful when you see the blue card stuff. Rather, you know, look for someone else. Then we've got what we call an installation electrician, by far the majority in the industry. These guys work in every type of installation. They can certify most all installations, except, of course, those are in explosive atmospheres. But DC, domestic, commercial, industrial, these guys can do it and issue the certificates. They are probably electricians as well. And then the last category is the one that's called the MIE, the Master Installation Electrician. The Master Installation Electrician can certify any type of installation, including those that we would find in explosive atmospheres, whether it's gas, vapor, liquids, or combustible dust. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the one in the medical fraternities as well. Peter, what about medium voltage installations? These are the overheads and the Eskom stuff and the local authority stuff and supply authority stuff and the big wires and the big stuff and the transformers and stuff. The legislation is interesting. It says that if you are the owner of an electrical installation, you must have such a certificate. It did not specify the voltage. So yes, for your medium voltage installation, you must also have some certification. Who issues that? Well, it all depends on the competency. And here the legislation says that medium voltage installation certificates of safety is called. It's not the COC. We want to distinguish between the two, certificate of safety. A registered person must have proof of competency to the satisfactory of the inspector as far as the design, construction, testing of these electrical installations before he can certify and say, you know what, the medium voltage part of your installation, and these normally range from 1001 volts up to 275 or 33 or 11,000 volts or 3,300 volts or 6,000 volts. And they can issue these certificates of safety. Alternatively, the resident engineer or the appointed responsible person can issue a document saying that they compliance. What happens if the equipment belongs to Eskom itself? Yeah, Eskom is a whole new ball game, because they're saying the following, that they are responsible up until the point of termination of their distribution network. And on the secondary side, of the connection side of the transformer, you take over the responsibility. The equipment, however, forms part of medium voltage installations, so it becomes access is a problem, and you don't want to send an electrician into a transformer yard. It's never worked there before. Doesn't matter what kind of accreditation he's got or registration he's got, you don't want to do that. So if you use transformers of your own, mini subs, and you reticulate in your plant yourself, then you're going to get someone that can actually do the certificates for yourself. Eskom is not going to take that responsibility. I think we see this particular problem a lot in the industry, where competency becomes an issue, especially in rural areas. We have a guy that knows something about everything. He can do some mechanical work, he can do some fitting, and he can do some plumbing and carpentry and painting, and he's also not a too bad electrician. The law actually is clear. It says that when we talk about electrical installations, only competent persons are allowed to work on these installations. So should an incident occur, the owner or user is responsible to be able to prove that that person was adequately trained, and that he in fact has the competency, and the proof thereof exists that he was allowed to work on these installations. So please, if you have a handyman and he's good at his job and he's a nice guy, our incidents happens and they can take place, and the guy can walk on, climb on a step ladder to replace a light bulb, get a shock, fall off the step ladder, break his leg, and then things goes really south very quickly. A lot of investigations, a lot of stuff happening. So be careful in your selection of what needs to be done by whom. Yeah, but Peter, our guys only work on, installations that have been isolated, that are switched off. I hear you, although there's the human element, the human factor that's involved. Anybody can change a light bulb. Let me just climb up there and, we change it at home as well. My advice to clients normally are, when you've got these handymen, keep them under control. Make sure that you ask them, or make the boundaries very clear. This is what you may and this is what you may not. If you have to open up that box, then you got to call someone else. That's not going to work for us. Peter, we've got a silo which is in a fairly rural area, in the platteland, and electricians are not just in the yellow pages and a phone call away. So we have to make use of some people that we think we know that knows the job. That's fine. If we read the legislation, it says that if you get someone to work on your installation, you gave him permission as the owner or user, and in doing so, you basically take responsibility for whatever happens to that person. I think the little insert talks about no one may do installation work unless she does the work under the control of a registered person or herself as it is. The intention is to ensure that the installation work is carried out under clear instructions, guidance, and proper supervision, and that it complies with the health and safety standard. So point I'm making here is that when you phone this guy and you ask him to do something, knowing that he's not an electrician, that's something, make sure that you understand exactly what you're in for when you make that particular call. The certificate of compliance document remains valid until changes are made. What kind of changes, Peter? Well, we had a incline conveyor or a bucket hoist, or there is a SIFCAS or something like that, and we had to replace the motor. Couldn't find the exact same motor, so we replaced it with something else, and we've added on, a little bit of a support bracket on this side, and of course for that reason we had to reroute the cable, and the gland didn't fit because the whole opening wasn't the same. And when we collected the motor, we found out this motor is a little bit stronger, so we had to replace the circuit breaker. All of a sudden you've made changes, and those changes has an impact on the existing certificate, which means that the certificate that covers that part of aspect of the installation is no longer valid. This to me is one of the big challenges in our industry, because both you and I know that changes happens, maybe not so much in all your industries, but in factories, changes happen on a weekly, on a daily basis, where maintenance and repairs are undertaken and breakdowns are dealt with. And if it's a breakdown, production is king, and therefore we maak 'n boereplan and we put the stuff in and we tend to forget about it. So there has to be a system in place in the environment which says that if you want to make a change to the installation, and we've got documentation that we've developed as far as that's concerned, then these are the steps that must be followed. And if you make a tick at one of these boxes, it means that it will impact on the certificate. So certificates remains valid, Peter, even after 10 years. Yeah, even after 10 years, as long as there was no changes made to that installation. Peter, I'm in the process of selling my house. Can I take my certificate and give it to the new owner or the buyer? The law says, of course, it's transferable. Couple of conditions. You can transfer from the seller to the buyer, provided that the certificate's not more than 2 years old. If it's older, then boom, unfortunately, it is no longer transferable and a new certificate must be issued. How does industry deal with it? Well, on an interesting principle, they don't sell the property per se. They sell the company, and one of the assets in the company could be the electrical installation of the property in which the electrical installation is affixed, which means that there was no change in ownership. The company is still the company who is the owner of the installation. So most companies tend to use that sort of backdoor to bypass it. I don't know how far you're going to get away with that in the court. That is something that one probably can discuss. But for purpose of this discussion, if it's older than 2 years, guys, you cannot transfer it to the new owner. You've got to get a new certificate. Yeah, I just want to put 1 or 2 scenarios on the table. It hasn't happened on many occasions where a guy bought a house, got a certificate, and in 2 or 3 years' time, he gets a promotion, he has to move, and he wants to sell the house. And he says to himself, well, look, there's still 2 months left. I'm going to transfer this property, and I'm going to use the certificate that I've got, that I received when I bought it. Problem. There's a lot of problems in the installation. The seller says, but excuse me, I didn't make any changes. And only then he realizes that he was scammed right from the beginning, that the certificate that he received from the seller originally was in fact invalid. So my suggestions to clients are always the following. Your contract of sale should include the following clause. You are obviously allowed in terms of the law to transfer your certificate. However, your certificate will be validated, and if there's anything wrong, then the cost for the repairs will be for the seller's account, because I'm not going to accept a certificate trusting someone that I've never met. Remember, the person that signed the certificate you've never met. He's some electrician working somewhere. You've never met him, so you don't know what kind of character he is, and you had no contract with him, so you can't even take him to court. So I recommend to my clients, guys, if you get this opportunity to get the certificate transferred, make sure that there's a clause that the seller knows that if there's anything wrong, it's going to be repaired and the cost will be for your account. I think that probably is the safest way in which to cover that. Electrical compliance industry, like many others, as I mentioned earlier on, yeah, we've got these scammers. In our region, you can drive around and you'll see that poster that says 707 Rand. I don't know why the 7 Rand, but 707 Rand for a certificate of compliance. In fact, I always use the joke when someone phones me and they say, Peter, how much do you charge for a certificate of compliance? Our response in our company is, the certificate of compliance is for free, ma'am. And then, of course, there's a bit of silence on the other side of the phone, and the guy says, for free. Yep, it's for free. The inspection, testing, and the repairs, however, cost you money. I mean, typing up a certificate takes us a couple of minutes. It's really not a big effort. But the inspection, the testing and the repairs, that cost money. The problem with a certificate of compliance is that the moment this document has been issued and you've received an invalid document, do you have any efforts or any legal steps that you can take against this person that's issued this invalid certificate? Yes, there is a couple of steps, and we're going to explain it to them. In the later presentation, we're going to tell you what they are. But unfortunately, you'll see that it doesn't work that well at the system at this stage. So electrical compliance, like many others, are suffering from scammers. Be on the lookout, be careful. Do your homework, find out who this contractor is. If it comes with a special price, I'll talk to you about special prices a little bit later on as well. And make sure that, you know, if it comes with a blue certificate or the red one, which is fine, the yellow one is also fine, but not the blue one. So make sure that you check those credentials. So Peter, now I've got my certificate and I'm happy, my installation's running, my motor's up and running and alles is lekker. Wear and tear, things go wrong and we have to repair it. Employers are responsible to ensure a safe and healthy workplace, and to achieve this, a proactive approach involving responsible inspection and maintenance of installation machinery and appliances is required. There's no ways you can drive your car for 100,000 kilometers plus without checking the tires, checking the brakes, having it serviced regularly, and the same with an electrical installation. You've got that responsibility as the user owner to make sure that the installation remains safe for users in your plant. Now, to achieve this, a proactive approach involving inspection and maintenance of the installation machinery and appliances is required. And these will identify as far as reasonable possible and limit or mitigate the hazards that exist. The greater the potential hazard, the higher will be the standard of precautions that are required. I find that in especially rural installations, there's an old thing that goes, you know, if it's not broken, don't try to fix it, or don't fix it till it breaks. True. However, wear and tear will cause equipment to fail eventually. And sometimes the failure of this equipment can lead to some really serious incidents. And all that was required was actually a now and again walk through, have a look, see, feel stuff, touch it, make sure that it's still intact. One of the things that we do a lot is the moving machinery inspections for companies, and it would be amazing. You would be amazed if you see how many of the machine guards are actually held in place by pieces of wire or cable ties or are not there at all. So those are the things that it's working, but it's not working as safe as it could or as it should. So regular inspections are very important. An employer will not be able to hide behind his or her own ignorance or lack of expertise, especially when the necessary expertise is readily available. You don't need to get someone from overseas to come and have a look. You know, there's local people that has enough knowledge. They can advise you and say, boys, this stuff needs to be repaired or fixed. The common law duty has been expressed as follows. It says here, an employer owes a common law duty to an employee to take responsible or rather reasonable care for his safety. An employer is in the first place under a duty to see that his employees do not suffer through his personal negligence, such as failure to provide a proper and safe system of working and failure to provide proper and suitable plant. If he knows, or he ought to know, to have known of such a failure, if an employee is employed or worked on a dangerous character, the employer is bound to take all reasonable precautions for the workman's safety. Peter, these installations are massive. They are really big plants, and you know, there's no ways I'm going to be able to every morning before we start our morning meetings take a stroll through the plant to make sure that's true. However, there's lots of ways of dealing with that in the sense that your reporting structure, your subordinates that does regular inspections on plant and equipment, and they then have to have a mechanism where they can report such failure or potential failure of equipment or stuff. One of the things that the guys do is they like to play around with these infrared cameras and walk around and, you know, check the temperatures of stuff and etc. The piece of equipment can play quite a significant and important role in ensuring safety of an installation, and that really doesn't take a huge effort to stop plant, open up covers and inspect and make sure that it's still okay, and then close up and start up again. You can basically do that with minimal impact on the installation. If we look at the notion of safe, it is defined as free from a hazard. Hazard in turn means a source of or exposure to a danger. It is important to note how broad and wide-ranging these definitions are. Such broad definitions tend to place an onus on an employer on whose premises an accident has occurred. And that would be to show that his workplace or machinery was in fact safe. Peter, have you ever been to a silo when we start harvesting? Oh, yes, I have. And you would know that, you know, if those trucks are piled up and lined up in the driveway and they want to offload and you know, the harvester is waiting on the field and, you know, the roads are bad and you know, the clouds are building and oh, it's just a lot of pressure and it just goes lekker de mekaar at harvest time. I think we've experienced, you probably more than me. To show that his workplace or machinery was safe, and it is difficult to imagine any workplace accident other than those caused by employees themselves or so-called freak accidents that could not arguably be traced back to a source of danger. So if we argue and say, but you know what, it's harvest time, so just fix it temporarily to make sure that we can take in the load, and then you know, when it quiets down, we will have a look and make sure that, you know, we repair it in a proper manner. I think breakdowns are something that is practical and it happens, and it's definitely something that everybody in every industry deals with. But the liability doesn't distinguish and say, you know what, if it's a breakdown, then it's fine, it can be dangerous. No, it doesn't say that. It says that if you've got a breakdown, you've got to ensure that it still is safe for plant operators, and make sure that the measures that were put in place temporary will not endanger the operators or whoever is going to make use of that facility. This consideration for the safety has a crucial bearing on the test applied by the courts in determining whether or not an employer has breached the duty of care. Ultimately, the employer remains responsible and has, as we referred earlier on, a duty to care. This is a two-stage test. Firstly, the court decides whether or not the accident was caused by the employer's act or omission. If so, the second stage applies. Did the employer meet the required standard of care? If the accident could have been foreseen and the employer failed to take reasonable steps to prevent it, then he will not have met the required standard of care and he will be liable. One of the challenges I think arises here is that, you know, the depot manager, the silo manager is at home, gets a phone call, the elevator is broken down, we're going to replace another motor, we're going to, you know, fit some ropes to secure it down, we just want to get this truck offloaded or the hoppers emptied, just to let you know. Yeah, it's fine, carry on, do it. And boom, that's when things can go horribly wrong. A couple of years ago, we have an incident in the Viljoenskroon area, and that's all I'm going to say about that, where that unfortunately took place on a Sunday afternoon, and there was communication, instructions, and then of course it went wrong, and then there was the point of liability. It is therefore clear from this that the Act expects employers to adopt a proactive approach to health and safety. Peter, we are doing, you know, grain handling and sorting and production. Would love to be a nice little hospital to inspect everything and just, you know, do full-time inspections. I understand and I appreciate that. However, if you go to a site and you ask guys, can we have a look inside this room? No, we don't know where the keys are. But surely you know, it must be somewhere. No, this place hasn't been open for years. Okay, then we can start asking the questions. I mean, we've been to sites where the substations was bricked up, closed, and you can hear the noise, but you know, there's no access door to it. They are required to give careful consideration to potentially harmful materials, plant, equipment, or processes in the workplace, and to take reasonable steps to render these safe. The greater the seriousness, of course, of the potential harm, or the greater the probability of its occurrence, the greater will be the necessity for taking safety precautions, given that almost any electrical installation, machine, or appliance is capable of causing fatal injury. The most thorough precaution will be required of employers whose workplace contains such installations, appliances, and machines. No question that there is probably no production facility, site, factory, plant, silo, milling operation that has no electrical installations. We all have got. They're all dealing with it. We all know that our plant managers and our people that are appointed responsible are not always au fait with the electrical. They could be mechanical people. They could be administrative. I've met a couple of silo managers which are really good administrators. Nothing wrong with that, but from the technical side, they would be quite honest with you and say, you know what, we're not dealing with that side, that's for someone else. So we have to make sure that there's available knowledge. The knowledge is used to execute and conduct these inspections to make sure that the workplace remains a safe environment. What we've seen so far is that the Act requires employers to be proactive and to take steps to avoid workplace accidents. Proper maintenance is undoubtedly one of the most essentials of such steps. The requirements to maintain a safe and healthy workplace requires both an effective system for monitoring the state of the workplace and the corrections of any shortcomings. In our industry, we come across a lot of these installations, especially in more heavy engineering field, foundries, etc., where we run our operation for maximum profit and efficiency and demand without taking care of wear and tear. Eventually stuff will break down and it will cease to operate. The problem with not taking care is that you end up with a breakdown at number 99. And this is where the dangerous situation occurs, and it's fairly common. Good example would be we get sometimes breakdown calls for petro depots. Now, when you enter a petro depot, there's a lot of protocols that you have to follow, safety precautions. But if it's on a Friday afternoon late, let's say in the evening kind of thing, and there's 2 trucks that needs to be loaded and they're on their way to Durban, because it's the festive season, you can walk into that site with your flip-flops. You don't need a hard hat. You don't need your safety vest. Nothing wrong if you had a couple of beers, perhaps not too many, but you can still sort of knock past the breathalyzer. Then it's fine. It's a breakdown. I think what I'm trying to illustrate here is that the normal stuff that we have to do takes place in a controlled environment. The abnormal stuff that we have to do sometimes takes place in an uncontrolled environment. And then liability kicks in. So what these guys at the petro depot should have done is they should have said, you know what, we are going through a festive season. We are going to go through a low or rather a high production period. Let's check and make sure all our equipment is safe and it operates and there's no wear and tear, and yeah, if the odd breakdown happens, we've got contingency plans in place for that. So monitoring the state of the workplace and the correction of shortcomings, the extent and type of maintenance requires will obviously depend upon the nature of the manufacturing process, the substances used, and the risk posed to the health and safety of employees. If you look at the sugar mill industry, it's, in my opinion, a fairly dangerous industry to work in. We work with a lot of momentum. We work a lot of, steam-driven machinery and presses, etc. And yeah, if something goes wrong there, it takes quite a while to switch off the energy and make sure that we can actually repair whatever needs to be repaired. So what these guys do is they try and keep their systems going as far and as long as possible. And even if it means an increase in risk because of the intensity of the operation, they sometimes calculate that risk and say, let's move on. Peter, so how do we make sure that our installation remains safe? Although, we've got a certificate, but we want to make sure that, it is safe for us to use and to operate. I think regular inspections by qualified personnel will be an important part of effective monitoring systems. And I've been in a number of court cases where the magistrate or the judge would ask the maintenance manager, so how regularly did you walk through that plant and have a look at things and stuff? And then his response was, see, Your Honor, I'm so bogged down with administration in my office and works orders and procurements and signing off timesheets and dealing with health and safety meetings. I get there once a month or maybe twice a month or something like that. And then the question would be, is that enough? So regular inspections, qualified personnel, important part of effective monitoring systems. And if you look at the Act, it says that it requires employees to establish what hazards to employees' health and safety exist in their workplace. It will not be an acceptable defense in law for an employer to say that due to ignorance, I didn't know, or a lack of expertise. I'm an accountant. You know, what do I know about the mechanical stuff? Or he, she failed to identify or recognize such a hazard. Such an employer will be expected to make use of outside expertise. Peter, expertise costs money. That's true. That's very true. I, however, have built up a relationship with a lot of clients over the years where I would get a phone call and say, Peter, this is what we've done. What do you think about it? If I, at that stage, cannot answer the person with confidence, I would say, you know what, can I pop around tomorrow to have a look quickly? No, boys, it's fine. I think we can do this or that, and then we run it. So I always say to clients, build up a relationship with people that are going to execute maintenance, and you know, sometimes the one hand has to wash the other. If the guy sends you a quote and you feel that, you know, that's a 5-10% hefty quote there, boys, think about the other side of it. You know, I then have the ability to phone him and ask him, can you have a look and see, you know, if we're doing the right stuff here. And that would be a defense in your case, where you can say, yeah, of course, we make use of these guys to come and have a look, and we've done so fairly regularly. It will also not be an acceptable defense on the part of the employer that he or she believed that a given appliance, machine, or installation was safe. You know, when I looked at that machine, to me, it didn't look a problem at all. It's fine. It didn't make any funny noises, so we accepted it. What mattered, however, is that it's not what you believe, and whether you believe such thing was a reasonable and it's safe. What is more important is that the belief you had to test. Recently, we were acting for a client in a court case where a company was sold to a group of investors, and of course, the certificate of compliance was part of the deal. And once the deal was concluded with, the tenants in the shopping complex started to complain, and they said, you know, hopefully now that we've got new owners, our installations will be repaired and we won't have that regular breakdowns. And the buyer said, but hang on, we bought this building with a certificate. Surely, you know, it should mean that the installation is safe and it's fully functional and operational. And they said, you know what, let's take a closer look at the certificate that we've got. And nothing funny about it, but it was all bogus and, you know, not valid at all. They went to court and they said, you know what, we are going to claim that this installation be repaired. And the judge immediately said, well, did you have any contract with the issuer of the certificate? And that was, of course, the registered person. And they said, no. I says, well, then you are welcome to go, you know, and sue him in his personal capacity. But there's nothing we can do for you. So they went back to the sellers and they said to the sellers, you know what? You gave us a certificate, it's not valid. And the sellers turned around and said, but you paid us. That means that we've concluded a contract. Yeah, but it's not valid. He says, well, then you'll have to take the legal steps. So point here is that if you're not an expert on a particular field, be it the certificate or the compliance level or whatever the case, then you will have to test that belief. You will have to get an expert in, or send the document to someone to validate, or invite a third party and say, can you just come and check whether the work that we've that was done actually constitute a valid certificate. We've got an agreement with a number of our clients where they would appoint us as validators or auditors. And before a contractor gets paid, we will be inspecting and make sure that the work actually is reflected in a certificate, and that the certificate in itself is a valid document. And if we sort of approve that and say, yeah, boys, use this fine, then the contractor gets paid. it does two things. It protects the person that's the novice, which is normally the owner of the plant. Second thing it does, it lets the contractor know, wow, okay, so all of a sudden I have now a third party involved that is, knowledgeable about this topic and aspect, and I better bring my A game, and no shortcuts kind of thing. So the fact that you've received the certificate, you go to court, you say, Your Honor, here we are, we've got a certificate. The judge is going to ask you, okay, so you're an expert, you looked at the certificate, you're happy with it, that you test whether the certificate was valid or not. And I think that answer might just make your case look a little bit bad. So the electrical fraternity is made up of two types of, and the two broad categories. We say you find electrical installations in atmospheres that are normal, and you find electrical installations in atmospheres that has the potential to suffer an explosion due to gas vapors, liquids in the atmosphere, or combustible dust. So one of the questions that we had when we prepared for the workshop was that who's responsible? Who makes the decision? Who decides whether we have hazardous, installations with explosive atmospheres? The funny part of it is that the owner user remains responsible for that decision. So if you are running a plant, you have to decide. I'm not an expert. How would I know? Well, I think we've spoken about it, and we made it clear that if you don't know, you'll have to contract that expertise in. But at the end of the day, the owner, user of that plant has to make sure that he makes that call. When I compiled the presentation, one of the things that came to my mind is that I've seen through a couple of years that farmers themselves are now engaging in, storage location facilities, and they also have some animal feed production sites on their farms, and they're going into various sort of fields in the grain handling, sorting, manufacturing industry. And it raises the question that a farmer, he's excellent at what he's doing. How much of this explosive atmosphere, nature, and risk does he really, aware of? I recently did some work in the Karoo, and I tell you what, we went into a site and we asked the farmer, we would like to have a look and see, because he was producing for a company and they wanted to have a certificate. And he says, no, you can't go inside at the moment because there's too much dust in that area. That immediately tells me something that this farmer is not heard about these risks. And if they're engaging in this somewhere along the line, a platform needs to be created where we can provide them with that information, because they still employers, they still have a workplace. And, if we're part of that chain, Agbus, then maybe we should start thinking about putting some information out there and say, guys, if you're going to have your own animal running in your barn or whatever, and you're producing these animal feeds for your milking farm or whatever, then boom, you got to consider these elements of dust. So anybody can do recommendation. Peter, but that's dangerous. Well, yes, it is. So my advice to clients always are, if you're gonna engage in this area classification activity for your plant, do your homework well. Find out who does that. Find out who's got some experience in your particular industry, and do some homework. Follow up and check. And then when you've got your candidate, invite him to come and have a look and see what it looks like. If there's anything different to your installation or your production facility that doesn't form part of the normal run of the mill, And then once you selected your candidate, you then are probably about 60 to 70% there. Peter, but aren't all master installation electricians able to do this? The answer is absolutely no. When I have to advise a client about whether his atmosphere or plant has the potential, I have to do quite a lot of research to understand what is the production involved, what kind of raw materials he uses, what other risks are involved, what is the possibility of expertise in terms of production staff, who's managing the plant, who's maintaining the plant. There's a lot of stuff that you have to consider before you can really make a proper recommendation to a client. Please don't be under any illusion or disillusion that if he classified my plant, he's liable. It's not the case. Only users are responsible to accept the recommendation made by someone. One of the other questions that we had so far was that, so how does this process of area classification or zoning gets done to identify? I know I've got a normal electrical installation in the admin section in the warehouse, but the other side is a little bit worried. There's a lot of dust, or we're using with flammable liquids. So how does that process work? Well, the inspector or the consultant is guided by SANS standard. The South African Bureau Standard are writing the South African national standards, and in these documents they would make certain recommendations as to, if this is the case, this is the approach that you take. Unfortunately, the document isn't what we call training material. It doesn't sketch a scenario from every known, kind of industry and say, if you have this, then this is the zoning. If you have this, then the zoning becomes that. All right. It doesn't have that. So the standard acts as a guide, and the person that you engage to do the work for you got to have some experience in this activity. I've met a lot of guys that are really good at their job, and they understand the industry, and these are guys that can tell you stories about an array of industries that they worked in before. Then I also met some people that are good at giving you the cut and paste story. They take sections out of the standard, they cut it into a report, and they paste it, and they send it to you and say, there's your area classification. That document is to some degree meaningless. It doesn't help you a lot, because we're closer to a solution or a resolution to your problem than what you were before that. So my advice would be find someone that can talk your industry with you, that can explain to you, I've been there, I've done that, I understand how you do this. These are the things that I've seen in the past that is a problem. Yours is probably similar. These are the kind of solutions that we propose. So there's a number of standards that talks about area classification. The most prominent ones is the 679 series. There's two particular, one gas vapor and one for dust. And then we've got the old SABS or SANS 0108, 10108 as it's called nowadays, which talks about area classification and what the outcome could be. Peter, does a master installation electrician have to make a study of these documents? Oh yeah, of course, they write an exam and we test their knowledge on these topics, but it's like going for your driver's license. When you go for your driver's license, you climb behind the wheel of the car. It's midday or whatever, and the guy takes you on a fairly slow road or a quiet road, and he checks where you can give the right indications, do the right inspections, turn and keep to speed, and behave well. He never tests you during the night, or when there's a hailstorm, or when there is, bumper to bumper traffic kind of thing, or on the highway, or whatever the case might be. There's certain aspects of driving that is not being tested, and we have to assume that under those conditions and circumstances, you will be able to handle a car safely. And that's almost what happens in the registration of a registered person. I assume by the knowledge that I've tested that you will be able to do the work, but you will have to build up some experience, in my opinion. Once you've now appointed a person, this guy has got to go and do some inspections on site, and he's going to collect some evidence. And the way we will like to do it is we collect photographs. We collect a lot of photographs, and we include that in the report, because it's so easy to engage with someone if I have a shared visual. You know, if I read your report and your interpretation is slightly different to mine, then we are sort of, you know, going to end up in an empty street. So the interviews with the plant operators are also, in my opinion, quite important. Sometimes this can go fairly south as well. Oh, meneer, if you work here, you can't breathe. There's so much dust in the air. And then it's actually not the whole truth, but these folks, they feel a little bit crunchy, and they, you know, they don't get paid that well, they think, and therefore they will tell you there's so much dust you can't breathe in this place, you know. And so be careful. I always say to the guys, listen to everything, but don't write everything down. So the interviews with the plant operators and the management, of course, management will tell you, you know what, Peter, we've been running this plant for the past 35 years. We are a very proud company, got a proud reputation, never have an incident. My response normally is that, okay, judging from your age, you have been driving a motor car for quite a while. Yeah, of course, I do, yes, and I'm a responsible driver, and never, do you wear a safety belt? Yeah, that's the first thing I do. See, why? You're a good driver, you've got no history, why do you wear a safety belt? Just in case. Exactly, just in case. So the argument is not always valid to say that, you know what, it will not happen, it cannot happen, it has not happened. I think the law doesn't take that into account. It says you have the responsibility to ensure. So I like to talk to management, I like to talk to plant operators, and then if there's any other guys that should form part of our discussion or interviews, it's maintenance staff and cleaning staff. Don't ever underestimate the importance that cleaner staff will play. They will tell you, you know what, I come and I clean every day here, but if they just close that one pipe there that's leaking, I don't need to come and close or sweep here every day. So cleaning staff also can make quite a difference when I'm going to evaluate a plant in terms of the area classification. If dust is a mixture of substances, Peter, so we're dealing with stuff that we manufacture for the food industry. So we take a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and we mix it. There could be a question around the moisture content, the dust particle size, or any, for example, maize meal, whether they can participate in a dust explosion as well. Remember, not all dust can explode. Good example is cement. Cement can burn, you just need enough temperature, that's fine. So sometimes we end up in an industry where there is dust, but that doesn't mean to say that the dust is explosive. There's this misperception in a large part of the mining industry, for example, that people say coal dust is highly explosive. Not always the case. If your coal dust never had the opportunity to mix with
Okay, my apologies, everyone. I'm just going to ask Peter just to reconnect. We lost him there. Give me a couple of minutes. Okay, he lost signal, so they're just trying to reconnect. Apologies for that. I said we must just give them a couple of minutes. Basil, I see your hand is raised.
Gerard, I've put two questions in the chat box.
Yes.
Maybe while Peter is busy to connect, somebody on the school may have the answer to that. It'd be quite interesting to know.
If anybody an answer, just so we can just confirm with Peter. But I think just regarding your first question, I think it's always good to if you have emergency services coming out to your premises with an incident to obviously ensure that you know that the area is safe. So usually it's a good idea if there is electricity involved in the incident to have the electricians on hand. And on standby and at the premises at that time. I had an experience previously where there was a transformer that was burning at a mine we did some consulting at, and the emergency services, the fire brigade pitched up, and they wanted to put out the fire with water, with the transformer still being live. And fortunately, the electrician on site then stopped them, and they switched off the power before the time. So I think it's always important to have a look at those aspects as well. Yeah, from that standpoint. I don't know if anybody like to add something there.
Gerard, maybe the question is, because the response that I get, or the question that I get from some of our members is that the municipal services may not be up to standard to come out and to know how to manage a potential dust explosion before it explodes. Say, for instance, even if the grain in the silo, like sunflower seed, already has ignited, how to handle that, and if they have the equipment and the expertise to do that, and whose responsibility is it then in the end to ensure that level of care, because if the emergency services can't provide the service, must fall back on somebody, but surely not on the storage operator. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Vessel. Sorry, Peter just phoned me now. He said they've got load shedding, so they're just switching over to generator. We must just give them 5 minutes. But yeah, maybe we must revert the question to him and hear what his experiences have been. I'd like to maybe suggest let's maybe we should just take a bit of a break whilst we wait. Then yeah, it gives everybody just the opportunity to stretch some legs and so on. Maybe let's commence at 11:45. If everybody's happy with that, then I'll let Peter know we commence at 11:45. Okay, I see some thumbs up. Okay, so we'll commence at 11:45 then. I'll let Peter